Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Cold Hard Sports Talk with your hosts, Matty B and Woodsy.
Alrighty, boys. If you are an Edmonton listener and an Edmonton Oilers fan, you'll know this guy very well. Our guest today is one of Edmonton's finest, we'll say, and a guy that I can say Jake and I both looked up to getting into the broadcasting industry. Gene Principe is our guest today. Gino, this is awesome to have you on. Thank you for doing this.
Hey, man, no problem. I gotta say, it's a wonderful introduction. It makes me feel a tad old, but I mean, you know what? It really is very gracious, and it is respectful, and I guess it says that I've been around for a while. When I see young guys like you guys on the way up, acknowledge the fact that you quote unquote grew up watching me. So happy to be with both of you.
Now, I was talking to Matty B about it, and I was saying just growing up being an Oilers fan and all that, the three people who I really was the most inspired by as a kid were Ryan Smith, Dwayne Rollison, and Gene Principe. Those are the three for me.
Holy moly, that is, well, I've never played in a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final, but I have covered it. I was there. You know, it's interesting. First of all, that's wonderful. You know, that's incredible for you to say that. That's very, very nice. I think sometimes I wouldn't say I'm there because of the fans, but that has a lot to do with it. And if a certain number of fans year after year say, we don't like this guy, get rid of this guy, people might start listening. So it's nice of you to say that. And I remember those two guys, two specific moments from that 2006 Stanley Cup run. Rollison had been run into in Game 1, as you guys remember, and your listeners will remember, by Marc-Andre Bergeron and Andrew Ladd. And, in the playoffs, they have what they do is they have a podium set up for star players, coaches, and then they open up the room. So I was in the room, and I literally came around a corner and just banged right into Craig McTavish. And I said, hey, Mac T, how are you? And he kind of shrugged, right? It's one of the things you learn in sports. Don't ask how people are after a loss or a losing streak, because that's what they tie to. And he's, oh, I'm okay. I said, how's Rolly? He goes, done for the series. And he walked away. I'm like, what? Done for the series? I was like, how is that possible? And then Game 7, when the series ended, never forget it. Carolina has this, we call it like a wind tunnel, where the team, because the bench is on one side, you skate across, you go down this tunnel or through it, take a left, and you go to the dressing room. And I was standing where you take a left, go to the dressing room. I'll never forget Ryan Smith in tears, crying like he was 12 and had just lost Edmonton Minor Hockey Week, for example. And so those are two lasting memories of that 06 Stanley Cup final, specifically the final from Game 1 to Game 7.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That sounds like a Ryan Smith thing, right? Captain Canada, totally, right?
I don't think there's many people who truly cared about the game of hockey more.
I think one thing we find out, and this isn't meant as this is not a negative, but you have, for example, 750 players. They're not all going to be like Ryan Smith. And he, to me, is kind of at the top of the passion, commitment, sacrifice table. I think we agree on that. So is everybody going to be like Ryan Smith? No, doesn't mean they don't love the game. It doesn't mean they don't enjoy the game. It just doesn't mean they're at that level. It's just not possible for everyone to be there. I don't think top to bottom is huge. I think that it's quite close, but there have to be people, kind of in the middle, at the top, and at the bottom. People often ask me, who's your favorite Oiler? Who's your favorite Oiler? Well, I grew up during the dynasty, so,
you had a few guys to pick from, right?
So, pardon me?
You had a few guys to pick from.
Yeah, I got a few Hall of Famers to pick from, and as I segue into another story, that's been one of the great parts of my job, right? Here I am, a 17-year-old kid in 1984, running down Jasper Avenue, enjoying a Stanley Cup win, the first, And then here I am decades later covering the team and meeting Wayne Gretzky and meeting Grant Fuhr and Glenn Anderson and Paul Coffey and Kevin Lowe and Yari Curry and Esa Tikkanen, and Charlie Huddy, I had such a great opportunity, and Andy Moog, so I've had such a wonderful opportunity to meet so many of those players who were the greats of the greats and who are just wonderful Wayne Gretzky is as, as down to earth probably as your neighbor. And someone might go, really? I'd be like, really? He is that nice of a guy. I'll never forget when he was with the team as a vice chairman and we were in Nashville. And there was a group of us and we finished our interviews and he was kind of standing around and he just goes, hey, so who wants to go for lunch? I'm like, I think Wayne Gretzky just asked me and us to go for lunch. For me, that's nearly a drop dead moment, for a kid that grew up in Edmonton, to be around a guy like Wayne Gretzky. Those guys, as great as they were, Marc Messier, just wonderful, wonderful human beings.
So did you end up going for lunch with Wayne Gretzky?
We did.
Okay.
And the thing is this, I tell people in 2017 when the Oilers made it to Game 7 of the conference final, or Game 7 would have led them to the conference final against Nashville. The highlight was the action, knocking off San Diego, getting to that Game 7. They should have beat Anaheim. Who knows what they would have done against Nashville. But the other great part was that Wayne, here's this humble guy who's the vice chairman. He would not. So what they do is they have a team bus and they have a media bus because there's a fair amount of media. And I think they want their separation. After games, it's another spot, not so much for the coach to talk to the players, but just not to be crowded beside me after, a loss in a playoff game. And do they need to be sitting by me? No. So Wayne would come on our bus. And so we would go from hotel to rink to airports to hotel to rink with Wayne Gretzky on our bus. And he loved to tell stories. And he would tell stories about names that you and I would all recognize. And then he would tell stories about players, lesser known players, or just people. It was fantastic. It was just like, Uncle Wayne is telling stories and we're all just sitting there listening. So one of those fringe benefits, a huge fringe benefit that you never really think of when you get into the business, but one that I've really been lucky enough to live.
And
so you're saying Wayne Gretzky's a big story guy, so we should probably try and get him on the podcast too, right? He's probably got some.
Yeah. I think he'd have a story or two to tell. And he would. And what I loved about him is that he would tell the story like it was his first time telling it. There was no sense that he was, not playing to a lesser crowd, but if you're in front of let's say you're in with Messier and Brett Hall and Pavel Bure, I'm just picking players, right? Ex-players. You're in this crowd, ex-players, alumni, and then he's with just a bunch of media guys. But he would tell the story and laugh like it was the first time he told it. And a heck of a storyteller as well. Like some wonderful stories. It really was a kind of a dream to have an opportunity to meet and get to know these players that I literally grew up watching and cheering for.
Well, you, like you mentioned, grew up cheering for the Oilers, grew up an Edmonton boy, North Edmonton boy as well, just like Jake and I, right?
Absolutely. North side. You know what? I grew up about a mile west of the rink, the old rink.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, the Edmonton Coliseum. And then back in 1983, when I was 16, we moved to the north side. And, other than some work that took me away from Edmonton, I've been living on the north side, pushing on 40 years almost. And, I love it. I mean, it's where I grew up. It's where my family is. It's really where my history is. And so I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. If I'm going to be in Edmonton, this is the area I want to be in.
Is there a favorite spot in North Edmonton, like one of those restaurants or anything that you kind of like? There used to be a few of them.
Well, when you guys were probably not even born, we used to always go to the Greenhouse at Londonderry Mall. It was a bar, and there weren't many bars on the north side back then, but it was kind of one of those places you either started or finished your night there. You'd either start there and it was slow, and then you would head downtown, or downtown was kind of wrapping up, or it was like 1 or whatever, and you'd say, hey, let's go by the Greenhouse, because it was virtually on the way home. So I wouldn't say you had to exactly pass it, but it wasn't far out of the way. And certainly one of our staples growing up, after going out, we would always go to Boston Pizza. And, funny
Yeah.
enough, here I am decades later with 3 kids. We still go to Boston Pizza. The kids love it. And my personal favorite, the Boston Brute, which I've probably ordered enough times to own shares in it. So yeah, just stuff like that, that you did. I think one of the neat things when you stay in the same area for a long time, you do it as a kid, then you do it as an adult, then you do it as someone who's married, then you do it as someone who is married with kids, so you kind of see all the sort of different levels of your life happening in one great area.
Yeah. So when you were growing up and you mentioned like obviously watching and cheering for the others, were you a hockey player? Was there a dream to go play in the NHL or anything like that?
No, on that. I was a hockey player,
Okay.
but I was, how they say, oh, the guy can't skate. Well, that was me. I just, I would go do a lot of skating on my own. I'm not sure there were skating coaches back then, or you could take skating lessons. But I just couldn't. I just, I could. It was funny because I felt like I was a pretty good skater with no equipment. But as soon as I put the shin pads on, I just felt so encumbered and just I felt uncomfortable to skate the way I felt I was skating anyways without shin pads. But I did play up until I was about 16, but I was really small. When I was about 16, I was only about 5'3", and the kids, you're getting into midget hockey, which we don't call it that anymore, but we did at the time. And it was kind of like, this is getting a bit too, people were hitting and I was just kind of small. And then I happened to grow later than that. I actually, my favorite sport sort of growing up, because I think I was better at it, was soccer. And soccer was sort of what I envisioned as my potential future. I thought as an Italian, it was a bit lofty, but I thought I could play for the Italian national team. I could be a pro soccer player. And then when I was trying out for the under 16 Alberta team, back then, again, to show my age, there were no indoor facilities. Your indoor soccer was in a gym. That's what we had. And that's what we used. And I wasn't the first cut, but I also wasn't the last cut. And I kind of went, I don't think the soccer thing is going to kind of pan out the way I had hoped. So what am I going to do? And I kind of thought, I love sports. I love watching them. I love talking about them. I love seeing them. So maybe I could be a sportscaster, just continue with pro sports, not as a player, but as someone who covers them. And really, that's kind of a simple a turning point there was in my life to want to do this and then do it.
Was there sort of like a dream in sports broadcasting, or was it just kind of like I just want to be doing something in this sort of sphere?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I would be lying if when I was 18 and going to NAIT, the post-secondary school in Edmonton. Are you a grad from there too? Both of you?
All right,
No,
TV.
I'm a Mount Royal grad. So
Mount Royal.
No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
No, that's another great school. I mean,
yeah.
that's one thing in Alberta. If you want to be in broadcasting, there's no shortage of great schools to go to in both major cities. But no, like when I was going to NAIT, I didn't think, I wasn't like, I want to be a reporter and host the Oilers. I think there's two things a lot of young people want to be if they want to be on TV. They want to either do the late night sports shows, doing the highlights, or I think they want to do play-by-play, generally speaking. And so I was I think I was leaning towards being a late night highlight host, which is what I did, I would say from about 87, 88 till for about 10, 11 years. That's what I did. I worked nights and I did highlight shows. This is before the advent of even Sportsnet was on board, and our opposition was just kind of getting their feet wet, starting in broadcasting. And then at some point, I think I thought, I'm not sure I want to work. I want to work at the event. I don't want to talk about it after it's over. And that's when I started to transition, probably late 1990s. I started hosting the Oiler games. And that's when I thought, I kind of like this. I kind of like being at the game. And I must say, there's no better feeling, being around the room when the team wins and you're interviewing the game-winning goal scorer or the number one goalie or whomever's the star of the show for that night. And so, yeah, I really got kind of an attraction to doing that. So I'm glad to this point I've been able to continue doing that.
And like, I guess, do you have any stories about getting your first broadcasting gig? Do you have any, like, I know there's been a few really cool stories that we've had on air about guys getting their first broadcasting gig. So do you have a good one for that?
Well, my first job I got sort of by accident. I was working in Kamloops, BC, and my internship through Nate was over. So I didn't have much of a resume tape. And one weekend, my friend and I went out. We shot all this stuff, and we kind of. I don't want to say I lied on the tape because I did do the work, but it wasn't kind of the original. When I originally did the work, I sort of kind of renovated it, I guess you could say. And then next thing you know, I sent out a bunch of tapes and I got a call and Edmonton TV station said, "Hey, you want to give this a shot?" But I got to say, like, I sat through city council meetings, fallen asleep. I've covered inquiries, about, multiple, I don't want to say multiple deaths, but I've covered some really hard hitting, newsy stuff that I had never really intended on covering. Never wanted to be honest with you, but it was a path to where I wanted to be. And I remember even, there was a labor dispute at a Winnipeg TV station, and they called and said, "Hey, why don't you come work for us? And we'll put you up in a hotel." And I'd been waiting for this break for a long time, and I kind of thought to myself, I'm not sure that's the way I want to kind of get started, going across lines. And I said, "No, you know what, I'll wait." And luckily it turned out great. About 6 months later, they called me and said, "Hey, we have a legitimate job. Do you want to come work for us?" And really for me, that was my big break, getting to Winnipeg, covering the NHL, the CFL, and just getting more opportunity to work in a bigger market.
Yeah, tell us what it was like kind of in Winnipeg and kind of working there as one of your, I guess, like first, real sports kind of gigs.
It was really, I would say, the turning point in my career. I worked in Toronto and now work for Sportsnet, and people are so gracious and friendly and talk to you. But I would say Winnipeg was kind of that kind of swing area. I started there in 1992, so I'd been working for 5 years, and I was in Lethbridge, which was a nice city. But I wanted to move on and move ahead, and somebody in Winnipeg saw me and thought, I'm not sure I like everything I see now, but it's like a player in any sport. You see them at 17 or 18 or 20 or 22 and say, well, what am I going to see when they're 24 or 25 or 27? And luckily someone saw me and said, "Hey, I think I can see some good things coming for this guy." So it gave me a chance to do two things. We did a late night sports show, which was great. Lots of live reactionary television and doing highlights. And then I was able to move over and host the Winnipeg Jets for a season. And that got my feet wet for what eventually became, the opportunity to host the Oilers. So really that was, we talk about turning points in sports and careers and lives. And for me, career-wise, not to mention, I go to Winnipeg and I end up meeting my future wife. So that city has, a lot of fondness from me towards it because of what it meant career-wise for me professionally, but also what it meant personally.
Was the goal always to try and kind of get back home?
Yes and no. Originally, yes, that definitely was my goal. I applied for news jobs and didn't get them. Then I got to Winnipeg, and then I got to Toronto. Right now you're in Toronto. It's a big market, lots of opportunities. And I had actually sort of dabbled in, I got myself an agent or some agents that had some interest in me for jobs in the US. And actually, when the job in Edmonton came up, there was an opening for a hockey reporter in Detroit. And no guarantees I would have got it. Like, I'm not saying I would have, but they had some interest. And, but I had this opportunity to move to Edmonton. And I thought, my parents are getting older. My wife and I were just married, and she was just pregnant with our first kid. And I thought, I've always made career moves, and this now is going to be not only a career move, but a personal move. So I moved back to Edmonton, and that was summer of 1998. And here we are, literally almost 23 years later. And, it's worked out. Who knows what would have happened, if you go through the other door, but I'm glad I went through this door for sure.
Toronto is kind of like a dog eat dog world out there when it comes to this kind of stuff, eh?
Yeah, it's different, like I think, when you get into the markets that like Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Ottawa, we have rivals, but I would say most of us are pretty friendly. I think that the rivalry is also can be friendly in Toronto as well. I just think, I don't know if it's just a geography thing or a distance thing that, basically all our bosses are in Toronto. And so there seems to be kind of like, a bit of separation. Now, do I want to beat the pants off my competitor in Edmonton? Absolutely. And vice versa. But, it's not like we don't say, hey, good morning, how are you? Or if we have events in our personal lives that we don't call, and whether it's pass on condolences or congratulations, like it's not a cutthroat, hey, he works for them, I work for them, we're not talking, we're not getting along. Far from it, far from it. So it's a great environment, in fact, because I think everybody understands when it's friendly time, but everyone understands when it's go time and it's work time, and it's time to make sure you're doing the best that you can at your own job.
It's just like the NHL. Like you might have two guys who play in the Battle of Alberta, but then still go golfing in the off season.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little like, I've always, and I'm 54, so I'm kind of part new school, part old school. I always, it amazes me the interaction post game. I know myself, I've played against friends in sports, and I'm telling you, if I've lost, they're the last person I want to see or talk to. I'm not saying that lasts, a week or anything, but honestly, if I lose against my friends, I'm pissed off. Like I'm not in a good mood, and I don't necessarily want to see them. But the players nowadays, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, because I think the game should be played, and I don't believe that because player A from Edmonton and player B from Winnipeg see each other after the game, do I think player A and B don't try their hardest, don't try their best, don't attempt to win? Like you can separate the two. And I think in the old days, I don't think, that happened as easily. And I really believe there was well, we're not going to go to the same place as them, or you hear in the old days, they wouldn't ride in the same train, or there was no interaction, where now there is, like, and it's okay. I've never felt or seen or heard a player give less of themselves because they were in the corner going up against a friend. If you think that's true, it's not. I'm sure coaches and general managers, if you're the losing team, kind of, you're like, but they've given their all for you on the ice during that game. So I think it's okay for them to do whatever they want to do after the game.
Do you remember your first game hosting the Oilers?
I do. New York City.
What was it like? Were you a little nervous?
Oh, well, two things happened. My wife was nice enough to give me a ride to the airport, and I was flying out at 8:30 from Edmonton to Toronto and then New York. Well, I showed up at 5 to 8, and I was kind of new to traveling at that point, and there was a huge lineup. And I was like, oh my God, like it's my first game and I don't even know if I'm going to make it. Thankfully, I made it. But I remember, we call it white knuckling, just like if you're, in fear driving or whatever. I was holding on to that microphone like it was the last piece of anything that was going to keep me in a survival mode, because I literally was just trying to talk without mumbling or stumbling or making a mistake. I can't even really remember the night. I just remember the start. I couldn't tell you who I talked to. I couldn't tell you how Edmonton did. I don't remember anything. I think I somewhat blacked out for much of the 2.5 hours, but I was hugely nervous, and I think it was a professional nervousness and it was a personal one. Now, first time of my career, back then you weren't picking up all these television stations I was working for. So, family, friends, they never really had seen me work. Not much, very limited. And so I was kind of exposing myself to the Oilers audience, but also my sort of family and friends and people I grew up with. And so it was sort of double nerves. But, I've worked with so many great producers and cameramen and audio people and assistants. And I mean, it really is a great team. And they're different teams because you're in all these different cities. But I've had so much help along the way. But I do remember being in New York and being incredibly, I think, probably scared and full of nerves.
And it got easier from there.
Yeah, and I think, like I'm still a bit, I don't know, nervous. Maybe it's a balance of a bit of nerves and excitement, right? You're getting ready to go on TV to talk about sports and about, well, nowadays McDavid or Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins or Mike Smith, whatever's going on. I mean, that's exciting, right? So that means you're excited, and just like the players, like different because they have a hand in what's going on in the game, but they go on the ice, and probably if you're Kyler Yamamoto in your first year, second year, you're probably quite nervous or pretty nervous, but then it becomes a kind of a slide from nerves to excitement, right? And it kind of a balance. But for me, it's more excitement. I'm thinking, look, I often will just, the 30 seconds before we go to air, I'll just look around the building, whatever building it might be. I'll look at the benches and just kind of go, look where I am, right? Look where I am and look what I'm doing. So let's get this right. And if you don't, you just fix it. You keep going. That's one thing I kind of like about live TV. If you make a mistake, you either just let it go and pretend it never happened, or you fix it and then you continue forward, right? So you got two pretty good options.
So that's kind of something we actually like to ask a lot of different athletes we talk about, is like various different pre-game or whatever superstitions. You just talk, taking that time and like look at the benches. Do you have any other kind of like pre-show or game day rituals you do?
Yeah, I usually will. I wasn't much of a coffee drinker, but now oftentimes I'll have one kind of 6:30, 6:45. I feel like it gives me a little bit of a shot of energy. I may not even finish it. I also like to have a little piece of dessert if I can, I usually don't, like I'll eat around 1:00 and then I won't really eat till after the game. Because if I eat before, I literally just want to hop on a couch, right? And just kind of lie there and watch the game. I definitely, I don't really write anything. I more just sort of walk myself through my own personal script. Producers are great. Like we'll have, let's say we'll have 3 topic storylines. Oilers won 5 in a row, okay? And Oilers power play 26% in those 5 games. Opposition 2 points out of a playoff spot. Like let's say those are the 3 storylines, and I'll just in my own head just kind of go, okay, this is the main title of that storyline, but what are the numbers? What is the information? What do you want to use to flush that out? I once a producer told me, he goes, people can see that. So you don't want to just say exactly what they see. You want to add to that. You want to build on that. And so I think one thing that I've done over the years is I've started using quotes, information. You go to morning skates and you talk to 10 people and 2 coaches. So you've talked to a dozen people, I'd say. I mean, there's lots of good information there. So maybe the Oilers have won 5 in a row, but I say, here's what Dave Tippett thinks. Dave Tippett says that they've really been able to handle themselves so well defensively. That's why it's led to offense, and their plus minus goals for and against is 18 in those 5 games. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. So that's kind of where, okay, they can see they won 5 in a row, but now Gene's trying to give them some insight through players and coaches as to why that's the case. So I think that's something over the years that I really tried to, in the beginning, you were trying to think of your own, well, what are my reasons? And I'm thinking, I have so many resources here. It's like when you write a paper for school, right? And at the end or whatever, you have to put your references. I got it from here. Well, I get it from Tippett and McDavid and Draisaitl and Travis Green and Elias Pettersson and Ryan Getzlaff, whoever, right? So those are the best resources possible. If I say Dave Tippett said, I think they're going to listen a little more. Or Connor McDavid said, than if I say, well, Gene Principe said. No, I think they get it more when it's coming from a player or coach.
Well, the one thing that people I think may have listened more to you over the years is your famous, I guess we'll call them puns, to open up the cold opens, I almost like to call them. where did those begin, and who the heck vets those?
Well, great question. Those began after the Stanley Cup run to Game 7. So they go to the Game 7, and Chris Pronger gets traded, and the Oilers only won 2 of their last 20 games. And, you know, I remember myself, I mean, I grew up an Oilers fan. I don't consider myself one on TV. That's where it's, you know, straight down the middle. But I was like, man, you know, this is a tough stretch, and I'm the first person they see. So I want to give them something lively, something hopefully entertaining, something humorous, something that is positive. And that's, I mean, I'm not always positive, but that's kind of what I want to be, and that's what I want to show people. As you guys know, if the Oilers are in a slump, the fans will tell you the numbers better than you'll know yourself. They know exactly what's going on. So let's find a nugget. Let's find a positive. Let's find something that we can expand on. Maybe it's a player's ice time. He hit an all-time high in ice time, and even though he was -1 or even, you know, he's kind of breaking new ground. Maybe it's the fact that, you know, in third periods in the last 5 games, they've outshot the opponent. Like, you know, I'm not saying that it was always easy, but it was about trying to find something positive. So you take that, and then you start adding some props and some puns. And I really, it just kind of started by accident. The positivity began first. And then I always felt like I'm an Italian guy, and I like using my hands, and we just sort of started to use stuff. And it's an advantage. Back then, my kids were all young, and even now we have so much stuff around the house that I could always use something and turn it into something. So that's kind of how it started. Now, a great question about vetting, because years ago, nobody vetted anything. You just did it. And the producer, a lot of them kind of wanted to know, but kind of didn't. They wanted to be surprised too. They wanted to sort of react just like a viewer would react. But I would say as the world has changed and things are different now, it's in my best interest and Sportsnet's best interest and the team's best interest for someone other than just me to know what's going to happen. So what'll happen now is I will have an idea. I'll have an idea of what props I want to use and what puns. And then I'll go to our producer and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. And then they usually will, I mean, more often than not, they'll rubber stamp it. But it does give me another level to, they might say, okay, but you know what? Instead of saying this, maybe try this way. Okay, that makes sense. If it's a little more prickly than that, then we take it to the next level. And our boss is in Toronto. Usually if it gets to that, I'm even double clutching whether I even want to go that far for it. But if I'm just being really precautious, then I will do it. And again, more often than not, they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. Just make sure you, whatever, blank. Make sure you make this point, and that, you know, don't maybe use this terminology. So it's about massaging it and just making sure that it kind of fits for me, for the company, for the Oilers, the opposition, and the entirety of the National Hockey League. Because really, every time you go out there, you're representing lots of different factions of the sport. So you want to make sure that everybody kind of goes, okay, that worked.
So you're telling us that you don't bring it to like your family and say, hey, is this going to be funny? Do you think people will like this?
Well, I do that with my kids and my wife, for sure, because they're kind of the test audience. And the more they grown, the more it's 2 thumbs up, because they'll just like, oh, dad, oh, dad. Okay,
Dad's back at it.
That's in for sure, you know, because that's what I like about puns, you know, whether it's a good one or a bad one, it really relates to the groan that you get. And, you know, the bigger the groan or the bigger the head, tell us you're like, good, it worked. So yeah, they definitely, I do use them kind of as guinea pigs, especially during the days sometimes it's easy to come up with everything, you know, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay. And sometimes like, ooh, it's a bit of a challenge. You have like a bit of a writer's block on what you want to do and how you want to do it. So I often will use them during the day, just kind of bounce ideas off them, so that hopefully by, you know, 7 o'clock game time, I've got it straight.
And do you remember like your first one that you kind of were like, okay, this is a thing, like we got to keep doing this?
I do remember that actually. I was doing an intermission interview, and Chris Chelios had done and said some stuff about Gary Bettman that the commissioner didn't like, and so that was kind of one of our topics. And Chris is Greek, and I just said you can obviously tell that the Greek defenseman is fed up, and so kind of went okay, like, and then back then there was no social media, so there wasn't really like an immediate, but a couple people text me that I know, and my boss said, hey, that was kind of funny, and so that was kind of the first one where I went, I just sort of went, oh, you got a reaction, right? I could have said, oh, you could tell the Greek defenseman or the Red Wings defenseman's upset, and that's it. Right, but I did that, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting that it caught people's attention. And so I would say that was the first of thousands that have come our way since then. But that was kind of the beginning of it all, for sure. So I do remember it.
I gotta say the one, obviously I can probably name about a dozen that like stick out to me, but the one that when we talk about Gene Principe moments, it's the Rob Shrimp one where he had the shrimp with you. That one, just watching that as a kid, just pure gold.
I know, and it's always like my motto, my approach, I guess, is to have fun with the players, to not make fun of the players. And so, geez, I made a living off Taylor Hall's name, and Nail Yakupov. I mean, they've had some great guys, and Shrimp, right? I mean, that's such a great one. And I remember, and Robbie Shrimp, first of all, he's an unbelievable talent. I still can't believe that he never was able to quite live up to all the expectations. His hand
ahead of his time.
Yeah, he was so talented. And I actually did an Instagram live with him last summer. It was so great catching up with him. And, it was very interesting how he described the pressure he felt and how difficult it was. And, but great guy, great talent. And, the other thing too is a lot of times the players, unless they're hurt, they really don't know what you're doing. They're on the ice and listen, they're thinking about the team, their own play, success, but it's more their girlfriends or wives or parents, right, that see the stuff that might go back to them if you do something or say something, right? So, but I do remember that was, I've got my own, like there's some that I, some work, some don't, but yeah, there've been so many over the years, and I honestly, for me, it's so much fun to do, and I'm so thankful that they let me do it. And I know that not everybody likes it, I get that, but just for me, my own personal career and job satisfaction, it's a huge part of my enjoyment of covering the Oilers. And the other part is the fact that it is the Oilers, the team, and the city I grew up in.
It probably makes it easier that they were kind of, your childhood team, right?
I agree. I think, I don't know how to word it, but if I was working for the Ottawa Senators, for example, I don't know if that comfort level would be there. It would just be different. And I don't know why, because someone might say it might be more difficult to do that with your hometown team and within your hometown, as opposed to being out in Ottawa. I use them as an example. You could be Dallas, pick a city where no one really knows who you are, and you really could kind of free flow. But yeah, for me being from Edmonton, covering Edmonton, the Oilers, it's just, for me, it's been a really incredible fit. And, there's lots of young bucks, scratching at the door one of these days soon. But if I got a few more years left, I will, happily ride off into the sunset and be happy with what I've done and not so much be upset about what I might have been able not to do.
So now with that, do you have a favorite one that you've done, and maybe a one that you were like, after you were like, yeah, that didn't work?
Oh, geez. I like there's lots that don't work. It's funny sometimes I'm thinking, oh, this is going to kill. Like, this is so good, and then it's just like crickets. I'm just like, how did that happen? I thought that was going to be so
that was
good.
Gold.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple I remember. One in particular, because I really like Dustin Penner. And a few years ago, after he got traded, I don't know if you guys remember, but his wife had made pancakes and he
Mhm.
hurt his back.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
He hurt his back reaching for the pancakes, and then when he returned to the lineup, he hadn't played well. So I told the story, blah 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 blah, and I said, and since Penner's returned to the lineup, he's craped the bed, right? So for me,
Gold.
that was like now I will say this: I don't know if you could say that now. I would double clutch on that now, and you were talking about vetting. I probably would vet that because I just I just wouldn't be sure if someone might not think that's appropriate. Another one was, and this for sure I wouldn't do now. Jack Johnson was playing for the LA Kings, and he went out and went to football practice with USC, University of Southern California Trojans, right? And so he was playing quarterback and he had an offensive line. And I don't remember exactly the buildup, but basically something to the effect that, he dropped back. And luckily, the Trojans provided the protection for his Johnson. So, like, no way. That was literally, even when I did it then, it was Oilers were out of the playoffs. It was like a Saturday afternoon game. I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to do it, this might be the time no one's really seen it. And back then, there might have been social media, but it was not like today, right?
Right.
If you do something, it's going viral for the right or wrong reasons quickly. So those are a couple that I remember. And I remember and think, I don't think I'd be doing that, anymore, particularly the one about Jack Johnson.
That one is so good. Like that is like that. Like you couldn't have scripted that any better. Him going to the USC Trojans, right? Like
I know, and I couldn't help myself. Like
yeah,
it was like I was trying not to do it, and nobody. I'm not sure anybody at home, maybe, but like that's not a career defining moment, but like I could get in trouble for that. And so I should have went, I'm going to pass, but I just couldn't. I couldn't. Now that would have been, oh, geez, that had to be at least a dozen years ago. Now I might pass on it, not only because I'm a little bit older, but I think too, just because of how everything is nowadays. And the fact that something like that, if it happened and someone put it on social media, there'd be no getting away from it.
And do you have like one that kind of sticks out as your favorite? Like this one was my best one that I've ever done.
What's the gold standard for you?
Like if you were to put a demo out, what is the first one that is there?
It would be me in a hot dog.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that one.
Oh.
Okay, yeah.
That for sure. And then can I be frank with you? And the Oilers are playing catch up in the standings, and all that was. What else did I remember saying? How we'll see who ends up being tonight's wiener. It was just like another one. It was just like
it was too easy.
Yeah, it was too easy. And I remember the first time I wore it, and the Oilers had assistant coach Kelly Buchberger, right? So he said, oh, let's do the interview, because we used to interview the assistant coaches. And so we come back. I said, scores 2-0 after one, Oilers versus the Bruins. Happy to be joined by the Oilers assistant coach. Might be the first time in history a hot dog has interviewed a burger. So sometimes they truly, literally write themselves, right? So
it's too easy.
Hot dog though is when you have costumes, like you can do lots of puns and props for sure, but when you add costumes, it for people, I kind of get it, but I don't know exactly what. It takes it to a new level when you wear a costume. Like it just, now they go, okay, he's fully invested in this. He might be an idiot, but he's 100% going with it, and there's no turning back. And so I think that when you wear something like that, that's what people remember.
That just reminded me of, I think it was, it would have been like 2016 after we brought Todd McClellan in as head coach, and you did The Godfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I remember. Now I'm Italian, and I've seen Godfather and Godfather 2 and 3 many times. And I remember when he got hired, I go, I'm doing it. whenever I get the chance. And they'd won 4 in a row when they were playing his old team, the Sharks. And luckily, a good friend of mine, Dave Bird, he it's funny because I thought it'd be great if we could use it again, costume, music, right? And we couldn't use the music; it would have cost thousands. So a buddy of mine learned how to play the theme, and so and then now you've got another person involved. You've got costumes, you've got drinks. I'm like, this is for a low budget, like we've got something going here, So I had to work on the Vito Corleone voice, and that was and I remember about 3 days later. Again, coaches are busy, right? Like Todd's, he goes, we were in the scrum, and he goes, did you do something on like the Godfather or Toddfather or something like that? I go, yeah, I did. He goes, yeah, my kids are saying something, but I didn't really know what they were saying. I think sometimes people forget, like these coaches in particular, they're immersed in it. I mean, it is 24/7. And Todd was one of those guys, late nights after games, up and at the rink. I used to see Todd in the gym at 6 a.m. working out and on his way to start his day. Like, yeah, they don't really, they might hear about it, but you think they're watching my opening, they're getting to the meat of the game. That's what they want to see what's going on. But yeah, that was one of my, especially with the Italian heritage, that was one of my personal favorites as well.
Yeah, that's another one that just stands out to me. Gold, pure gold. Did you? I'm not sure because I haven't seen. Was it in black and white, or am I just remembering it that way?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was. Yeah, just to give it kind of that old, right, kind of the Godfather look.
Yeah.
So it was. And listen, the idea is, it's great to have an idea. You need that to get started, but there's so many people that help me put my openings together. Whether it's getting the props, whether it's being involved in the opening, whether it's coming up with, sometimes I'll have an idea and someone said, what about if you do this? And you go, that's even better. Let's do that, So it really is a team effort that makes it work, and we always say when we're doing the broadcasts on TV, there's 3 teams. There's, what did you say, the Oilers, the Canucks, and then there's our broadcast team, right? We always want to try and have a good game. It always feels better when your team, in this case, the Oilers, win. But you still want to feel at the end of the night like, hey, I had a good game. And sometimes, you have better games. Sometimes you don't have quite as good of games, just like, anybody at work or athletes, right? Not every day is going to be your greatest day.
I do want to ask about, like, do you have who's your favorite or the best, most entertaining, any of those kind of things, interview or player to interview over the years?
Not to name drop, but I've had the luxury of interviewing Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. And I think those two stand out because I don't get that kind of opportunity, right? Jordan I was covering the Raptors in Toronto, and I had kind of he was getting off the bus going to the dressing room, and our cameraman goes, let's go. Like, here's our chance, right? There was nobody around. So I kind of went beside him and walked with him, and he was very gracious, and he answered my questions and went into the dressing room. And I thought, holy, I just interviewed Michael Jordan. I would have been like 27, 28, something like that. Tiger Woods as well. That was a little bit later. He was emerging at that point. I think he'd won the Masters, but he hadn't put together his string of those major victories. And then Wayne Gretzky, I'll never forget the best interview I had with Wayne Gretzky was not on camera, even though I've had lots of opportunities. Again, he's a great guy, but I remember he was playing for LA, and Winnipeg was on the verge of moving out of town to Phoenix. And I'm in my studio at the rink at the Winnipeg Arena, and he pops his head in the door and he says, do you mind if I tape my stick in here? And I'm thinking, Wayne, you can sit on my lap if you want. Whatever you want. Now, he has no idea. I mean, I'm sure he knows I know who he is, but he has no idea I'm from Edmonton and, love this guy, right? So he walks in and he sits down and he tapes his stick. And while he's taping his stick, he's asking me questions, and we're talking about the Jets and the situation and what's going to happen. And he stayed about 5 minutes, and I didn't, if he stopped talking, I stopped talking because, he's getting ready for the game. And I just, I was kind of nervous. Well, I was nervous. But if he started a conversation again, then I would start up again. So it was one of my favorite, interview it might be more a conversation, that I've ever had. So I've been lucky I remember covering the 2004 World Series and interviewing the Boston Red Sox. Uh, I've been able to go to Olympics. For a son of two Italian immigrants, my dad was a carpenter, my mom made drapes for a living. I mean, that's about as simple a background as you get. And for me to be able to carve out with lots of luck, the kind of career I've had, the people that I've met, the places that I've gone, the family that I've built, I consider myself to be one of the luckiest people on the planet.
So now that you get to interview Connor McDavid on a daily basis, that adds to it too, eh?
Oh yeah, I mean, Connor's come a long way. Sometimes we forget that, they're 18 years old and we expect them to be so eloquent and talkative. And, Connor's a very nice guy. He's just more quiet when he's on camera. But I've found that he is very straightforward and honest. And I think, guys, it's going back to the Ryan Smith part about that sort of compete level and that commitment. When Connor's playing, like that's him. Like when he gets to the rink, it's all about the game. And so sometimes I think people want him to be a certain way or expect him that he's going to kind of put his guard down and that's not him. Like he's all business, the guy. He did not get to where he is in his life and his career by not necessarily being like that. And different people have different approaches, whichever way makes you successful. That's the way he is, and I really respect him for that. I don't, sometimes people say, oh, Connor's quiet or Connor this. I'm like, Connor's just Connor. And this is the way he is when he's in a game or they've lost a game or it's tied at 2 after 2, So one thing I will say, because of his demeanor, I really give, I don't know if I give more thought, but I really want to make sure that when I'm talking to him, this is going to be a good interview because it's Connor McDavid and you don't want to kind of screw it up. You want to make it a good interview, whether it's 2 or 3 questions or 4. You want to make sure you ask questions, not make statements. And you want to see if you can give the person at home a little bit of insight, what he's thinking and what the team's thinking, and a little bit of what the feel is like on the ice. Because we don't get that. We can watch it. We can see it. If you're at the rink, you can kind of sense it, but you don't really know what's going on the ice.
So one guy that we recently had on the podcast that you, I think, partially covered a little bit, and I want to know if there's any maybe cool stories about him, is Joaquin Gage.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Do you have any good stories about him?
Yeah, he is such a wonderful, wonderful guy. I think one of the great stories I heard about Joaquin was how when he was, and did he tell you one about Italy? When he got sunburned, he went skiing?
No.
Oh my gosh. So he's playing in Italy and, the games aren't so much like in North America. So he goes skiing and he gets sunburned on his face, like crazy sunburn. So then the next day he has to go back to the rink because they had a day off, and he tried to powder his face down because he's so burnt. And he just told the story how he went into the room, and it's like everybody just stopped, because Joaquin has kind of nice pigmentation. He's got nice color to his skin, but to imagine what he looks like, and then to see him, like he said, he was like just a cherry. And he said everybody just stopped, including the coach. So and now I'm telling the story and I'm kind of laughing about it, but to have him tell the story, it's just amazing. He's such a great storyteller, and he's such an engaging guy, pardon the pun. He's hard not to listen to. He's really hard not to listen to. And I worked with him this year on the broadcast, and he was a fantastic guy and fantastic to be around. He would be one of those guys, like those glue guys. You talk about a backup goalie who does what's best for the team. That's Joaquin. He's all about the team, and he'll tell you so many different stories, just about his career and about his personal life. Very fun guy.
he told us a story about Ryan Smith where they were in the back of some like van that they all had to go back from Northlands or whatever it was, and Sesame Street was coming into town. So that's why they were practicing over at the whatever the old building was called.
Yeah.
And he kind of looks around, or I think he says something along the lines of, "So why are we practicing over there?" or something like that. As everybody's seeing these giant Sesame Street trucks like pull out in front of them, right?
Yeah, that's
classic
Smitty.
story. That I mean, that doesn't surprise me. That is, I never heard that story from him before. That is a classic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one track mind, right, for Smitty.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And now, sorry, I want to ask this. It's half question, half favor. We need to have a name for this episode as the unrivaled king of puns. What should we title this episode with you on?
What are some examples of what you've titled episodes?
We usually just do like some little pun or pun-ish play on words. We had an ECHL tough guy on, so we called the episode Breaking Bones with Baronsy featuring Jeremy Barons. So
yeah, things like that. So
I'm just saying we have one of the greatest minds for this thing here. We got to use the resource.
Yeah. I'm thinking myself. Oh gosh, you know what? I'm trying to think of what would be a good one. I mean, roll out the welcome mat. No.
The Principe of Edmonton.
Yeah.
I actually like that one.
I like that one.
Hey?
Yeah.
Matty B trying to prove something here. There we go. What a time to come up with one.
Step back.
Okay.
Step back. Perfect.
Thank you.
This is going on Matty B's his reel. It's going on his demo. He might post this on his personal Facebook. I wouldn't be surprised if this little clip is on his Tinder account after.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Sometimes my kids are 18, 20, and 22, and not so much lately, but when Tinder came out, they'd say, "Hey, Dad, I saw you on Tinder," and I'm like, "I'm not sure what you mean by that." And they're like, "Well, you must have met somebody because they have their profile photo or whatever of you and him or you and her or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh," I go, "Okay." I said, "Yeah, I don't have a profile, and I'm not. I just want to clarify to you that I'm not on it." It was definitely between myself and the kids. It was a very Tinder moment.
So I actually was going to mention, I did mention earlier how
off air.
When I was that off air? I thought it was
off air. We mentioned it.
Oh, I mentioned after that I briefly met you in person before after a game. I was at a local bar in Edmonton called On the Rocks, and I was there celebrating a friend's birthday. So I was all dressed up, I had a nice suit on and everything. And after the Oilers game, you came in and everyone's trying to chat you up and getting around. I'm like, "Hey, Gene, you mind if I get a picture?" Got a nice picture with you. I'm looking okay. I'm in my nice suit. Ended up using that picture on my dating app I was using in younger days. And I can guarantee I had more matches from girls just who opened saying, "Is that Gene Principe?" than from girls who had any interest in anything romantic with me.
That is very funny. Hard to believe, but very, very funny that that's the case. I mean, in my day, the old-fashioned way, you met somebody at a bar, and that was kind of how you did it. But I know nowadays there's all kinds of different apps. But hey, if I am in any way, shape, or form help, I'm happy to do it.
That's great. We got the sign off on it. Yeah. We're good.
Gene, one last question I kind of wanted to ask you to kind of wrap this up is, Jake and I are both very young broadcasters, kind of trying to pave our way, if you will. Do you have, or what kind of advice do you, I guess, have, or a big piece of advice you have for young broadcasters, maybe in school right now or trying to break into the industry?
Well, if what you guys are doing is great. Right now, you're at a good place. What you're doing. You have this podcast going. You're getting to meet people. You're getting to network. So I think that's great. And I think it's just being really open-minded as to what, like, I didn't know I was going to end up here. It's your path isn't just like this, right? Your path is kind of like this, and you don't even know where you're going sometimes, right? But it is part of the journey. You often hear players say you want to enjoy the journey, and sometimes you're so focused on that last part of it that you don't enjoy all the things that you did. And I've been to so many cities and met so many people, so many great experiences. I think I would say be yourself, be hardworking, and be committed to doing the best you can in this. I think sometimes I meet people. This is kind of I'll say it how you get a junior hockey player and he's a great player and he thinks he's in great shape. Then he gets to the NHL and his great junior hockey shape is not what kind of shape the NHL players are in. And I think that's kind of, sometimes you run into people who think they're this and they're that, but I don't really see them showing the commitment and the drive and the dedication and the work ethic. So what I would say to you two guys, and you obviously have lots of natural talent, and I already can see just during this podcast, is really commit yourselves to what you want to be and how you think you want to get there. It may not be the path, but you still have to have a path or a plan, and then you see if it unfolds exactly like you want. For me, it didn't, but I ended up getting where I wanted to be, even if it took a bunch of twists and turns that I hadn't expected. And the other thing is, when you get a chance to network through these opportunities and you get to meet whomever it is, really not take advantage of it, but really take it in as a great step and a great opportunity to continue to further your process of moving forward with your careers. But I think you guys are doing great, and you just keep it up. Give me a few more years to do my thing, and then it'll be wide open for someone like you who's going to be, listen, I watched people growing up, and I ended up, not that I said I became them, but things change. People retire. Opportunities exist. And you just want to make sure you're as ready as possible when those chances come.
Gene, that was very, I guess,
Got to wrap up here before I start tearing up.
Yeah, I don't even know what the word is for that. That was very
inspirational.
We appreciate you coming on, hanging out with us, telling us some stories. This was a lot of fun and one of my favorite interviews we've done so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jake and Matt. No problem. Thank you for the time, and really wish you guys nothing but success both in life and in your careers.
Thanks, Gene. We appreciate it, man.